Are you a woman standing at a crossroads, eager for change? It's time to connect with your authentic and empowered self at Boss Leap. Join Dr. Sylvia Morris and Dr. Angela Walker in this empowering community where real-life stories of courageous and talented women inspire and motivate. Engage in honest conversations that foster well-being, drawing from our own journeys. Let us guide you toward profound growth and transformation in both your personal and professional life. Here are your hosts, Dr. Sylvia Morris and Dr. Angela Walker.
Welcome back to Boss Leap. I'm Dr. Sylvia Morris, and I'm here with my co-host, Dr. Angela C.B. Walker. And today we spoke with Dr. Melisa Holmes. She is a pediatric adolescent gynecologist and co-founder of Girlology. We had a great conversation on the arts and how parents can let their children fly. We also talked about place. Dr. Holmes is a Southerner, and how really important place becomes and how it shapes us. I'm from Los Angeles. Dr. Walker is a Texan. So, Angela, tell me, how does being a Texan shape you?
For me, that was an interesting question because I never really considered myself a true Texan because we arrived when I was 7. And my parents, my dad was from Reading, Pennsylvania, my mom from Newberry, South Carolina. And my mom really never embraced the South in terms of Texas, really until she, well into adulthood. So I always learned about the East Coast, the East Coast, the East Coast, because she loved the East Coast.
West is best.
But what I learned, and I guess part of, I think what I came to appreciate about the South was after I left the South. So I went to medical school, as you know, with you at Georgetown in Washington, D.C. And that was really the first time I had spent a significant amount of time out of the South. And for me, I felt like there was so much diversity that I never really appreciated and I felt was more appreciated when I left Texas. But I also encountered, I think, what I came to appreciate is Southern hospitality. So it really, for me, at least my experience, it really didn't matter where you went. It was that time in life, there was a lot more civility. And there was still, hey, how are you? You're walking down the street and you didn't necessarily feel like kind of a cold air from someone when you were ordering your coffee, like, come on, get it done, let's go. There, just more relaxed atmosphere. But Southern hospitality was real for me growing up. But leaving was a gift because you realize, okay, there's more to the world than just this one way of living. And I think that's the value of traveling, but that's getting off the topic of where I'm from. But yeah, it's interesting. I think a lot of where you're from has to do with how you embody that as a young kid growing up. And so, yes, I grew up in Texas, but my parents were not necessarily from Texas. So I got some of the values that they had from different parts of the U.S. How about you?
And it's funny because I think of you as a lady from Dallas. And because, of course, when we met, you said, I'm from Dallas. I'm like, okay, she's a Texan. I'm from Los Angeles. I'm from LA. I will always rep LA till the moment I'm not breathing. LA has shaped me in Inglewood, absolutely. LA, thinking about the diversity. So certainly Vietnamese, Japanese, Black folk, successful Black people. When I think of the Crenshaw district and Baldwin Hills and Ladera Heights and all those sorts of places, certainly the influence of the Chicano Latino population in Southern California and the beach. I am a beach girl. I got it honestly. We would go to the beach at the drop of a hat. It could be a Tuesday and you just want to go and ride your bike along the bike path. So for me, Los Angeles and certainly, I guess, Southern California has made me kind of think more openly, I hope, about the world and the country, and knowing that there are lots of different foods, there are lots of different opinions, and there is space for all of that diversity.
Yeah, and that's embraced, and
Mhm.
I love that part of, where you're from, California, and I think that's part of, just being open to different parts of the country. I think it's wonderful to feel proud of where you're from, but to also embrace, other people's experiences and where they're from. That's what I think makes the world a beautiful place. So,
I hope so. I hope so. So let us get into our conversation with Dr. Melisa Holmes.
I think this is gonna be such an exciting, conversation for our audience. I obviously, you'll see in the body of the interview that I am a big fangirl, always have been, always will be. She is just everything you hear is just true and authentic, but just a really powerful voice for all women and girls. So here we go. Okay, Melissa, we're going to just jump right into this interview. I've been so excited, as I already mentioned in the intro. But one thing we love to ask our listeners, and definitely want to know from you, is what was it like to be young Melissa? What made you tick at a young age? What did you think you wanted to do in this world?
Ah, young Melissa was super creative, and I loved being outside playing climbing trees. But I always had a creative project going on. I learned how to macrame. That's how old I am.
Oh,
I learned how to
wow.
Yeah.
crochet and sew, and I was always drawing and things. So that's kind of what drove me as a kid.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And that sounds like that fits right into your undergraduate major as having a bachelor's in fine arts. Can you tell us how the arts made you a better physician?
Yeah. So, like I said, I had always been creative, but I think that having formal training in drawing and painting really taught me how to observe things. And one of the things I learned is that you don't draw what you think you're seeing, you draw what you actually see. So you look, you observe, and every line, every dot, every curve is what you see. It's not a nose or a tree. And I think that that just gave me the practice of observing before I came to any sort of decision about what exactly I was seeing. And I think that applies in medicine, right? We have to make a lot of observations. We have to listen very carefully. We try, and it's best when we go in with no assumptions
Hmm.
and let the patient kind of guide us. So I think that was a big part of just my mindset going into medicine, which was a unique skill set I think I brought. But then at the same time, I think the dexterity I developed through learning how to sew and crochet and all that really helped me in the operating room.
I bet.
So,
And did you go in thinking you were going to be an artist and then came to medicine? Or how did that transition happen?
Yeah, I decided in high school that I wanted to be a doctor. And then when I went to college, I knew I loved art and I would never have another opportunity to study it formally. So I decided to major in art and then did all my pre-med prerequisites as an art major, which was a little weird. I mean, people did not understand me at all. And the pre-med advisor said I would never get into medical school. So, it was kind of interesting. But then when I got to medical school, I wanted to be the next Frank Netter. And I kept thinking, Frank
Oh,
Netter did
wow.
yeah.
The
remember the Netter
anatomy.
books? I mean, everything's
Yes.
digital now, but we had these gorgeous volumes of
Yes.
anatomy, and Frank Netter was the artist who drew all of those. And
Yes.
so I always thought I might do some medical illustration, but then I just fell in love with the clinical world, and that kind of dropped by the wayside.
So, from a practical standpoint, because we talk about this in the book, is that you do not have to, for those that are interested in medicine, you don't have to follow the pre-med track or the science track. But a lot of us didn't have that knowledge or wherewithal, fortitude, whatever you want to call it, to access other avenues. We were just told this is what you need to do and did it. Did you have anyone that gave you some advice and it was just you? I know I want to do art and I'm going to make it happen?
Yeah, it was me and my dad who was my biggest cheerleader. He was like the biggest, you can do anything. But he also said, you need a job that you can support yourself. And I don't know that art is it. So I didn't think that I could truly be an artist and support myself. So med school was like
Next.
a natural, like I had always been interested. So I was like, okay, well, I guess I'll be a doctor then.
But I
So
love that your parents or your father in particular supported you. I cannot imagine going to my mother to say I wanted to be an art major. She understood the science major part and going to medical school, but art would not have been on her list of allowable majors. So that's wonderful.
yeah. Yeah. My parents weren't super excited when I said I was going to be an art major, but they said, as long as you do something where you can make a living, then we'll support you. So I do. I'm very grateful for them, allowing that or encouraging that really. But I will tell you, the pre-med advisor was not supportive at all. Second year, I went to him and I said, this is what I want to do. And he's like, it'll never happen. He goes, come back to me your junior year and we'll talk again. And so I went back my junior year and I, told him I was still interested. I took my med cats and he was like, okay, well, if you want to try this. And when I got into med school, I became like one of the people he talked about the most, according to undergrads who would come through and say like, oh, you're the art major that Dr. So-and-so talked about, that you can major in anything. So you're right, you can.
Awesome.
Did he come back to you and say, hey, I was wrong or I underestimated you? Did he say anything or much success? What did he say?
No, it was the 80s. Men didn't do that.
That's the petty part of me. He was like, well, at least he could have admitted that he was wrong. So,
right. Right. Nope. Never got that. But he did allow, encourage people to major in something that they, wanted to major in, which is something I told medical students as a academic physician who was teaching medical students. I loved it when they came in with unusual undergraduate degrees. It just made them a really interesting student who brought a different perspective into, the med school.
Agreed. And even those students that have done something else career-wise, and then realize that they want to go into medicine, because usually at that point they know for sure, like, okay, there's nothing else out there and this is really what I want to do. So Great story. So tell us what you might tell young Melissa. It sounds like you pretty much kind of forged your own path. So I'm not sure that you have a whole lot that you would have told her. But anything at that stage you would have told her to do differently or advice you would have given yourself?
Yeah, I think the advice I would give myself looking back is not to be afraid to pivot and not to worry so much about what everybody else thought about my decisions. If I, to pivot, because I did, but I delayed pivoting because I was so worried about what my mentors would think and things like that.
Interesting. And
But
speaking
there's a
of
lot of pressure to kind of once you get on the train is moving forward and it's scary to think about pivoting or moving in a different direction than sort of the try, tested and true direction. And there's oftentimes not a lot of support, mainly because of the fear associated with losing whatever it is that you currently have. But this helps me think about, you did get off, you were in academics for a while, a long time. How did you get off the academic train?
Yeah, I loved academics. So coming out of residency, all I wanted to do was teach medical students and residents and do research and write the papers and speak at the big meetings. And I wanted to do all of that. And when I started in my after residency, I was the second woman in our academic department.
And
can
I
had
just stop you really quickly and
Exactly.
just add that you are a pediatric adolescent gynecologist, female, rare, and definitely was more rare then. So go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. And as I started, I really did general OBGYN, but even the OBGYN department, there were only 2 women when I started. I was the second. And I loved all those things that are required of an academic physician. So I was kind of my chairman and vice chair put me on the train to become like, these are the steps you'll take to become a chairman one day or a chairperson one day. They still called it chairman even when they talked to me. And so I was on national committees. I became a oral board examiner. I did all the things that I was supposed to do. And there were three things that made me decide that it was time to get off. And by this time, I already had 2 children. My husband had been a resident and a fellow. So we had this crazy busy life. And I was introduced to a woman that I really admired the research she had done. And she was a few years older than I was. And I thought, I want to be like her. And my chairman actually set up an appointment for us to meet at a national conference. And we talked, and I thought, wow, she's crushing it academically. And then when we started talking about the personal things, life, the real, like what we as women really struggle with, I just was so disheartened and sad to hear her story. Her children were not her priority because her academic career had to be. So she wasn't as involved in her children's life. She had a nanny who was just a nighttime nanny that would get up with her children if they were scared. And I thought, oh, that just makes me sad. That's just not what I want for me. I mean, that might be right for other people, but it wasn't what I wanted. So that was one thing. And then the other thing was when I was doing the oral board exams, you have to travel to Dallas and stay for a week, and you're giving exams all week long. And it's a huge privilege to be able to do it. I mean, you are surrounded by academic royalty. The people who wrote all of our textbooks were sitting next to me and having conversations with me. And it was great. But the whole time I was there, all I did was I missed my kids and I missed my patients. I missed being in the clinics. And so I came back and I told my department chair, I said, I don't want to be an oral board examiner. I'm going to withdraw from that. And he said, that is career suicide. And I was like, actually, I think it's going to give me life. And so I dropped off of the academic train. And then I also followed that by saying, and I think I only want to work 4 days a week. And and then that response was, we don't have a place for part-time doctors in this academic department. Yeah. And so I really thought, well, this is it. I mean, I don't know what I'm going to do. I guess I'm going to have to go into private practice or something.
And Melissa, what year roughly is this?
This was probably in the late 90s. Yeah, in the late 90s. And so I convinced him to let me work 4 days a week, but I started seeing patients at 7 a.m. and I finished at 3. So I was still there in clinic for the same amount of times, and I was still producing, research and all that stuff. But I could get home at the same time the school bus got my kids home, and that just made me happy.
Okay.
Plus, my kids were entering middle school, and as a pediatric and adolescent gyne, I had always thought that middle school was the most critical time that kids need their parents.
Absolutely.
I mean, my littles, anybody could love and nurture them and keep them safe. But as they hit middle school, I was like, they need their family values. They need me to be around more, to listen to them unpack their day, things like that. So I just pivoted a little bit. And then a couple of years later, we decided to move to a new city. And that's when I decided to take a year off to get my children settled into their new middle school.
Right.
I had a 3rd child. She was an infant. And so we moved to this new city in Greenville, South Carolina. And I took a year off to help my kids get settled. And in that year, we discovered my mother had really advancing Alzheimer's that was worse than I expected. And so that 1 year that I planned to take off turned into 7 years that I took off. And then I actually got back on and started practicing again 7 years later.
So we could go in 2 directions here because I really want to hear both of, many directions. But I do want to take just a little bit of time because I think the significance of being a caregiver for a parent is something that we don't talk about as women in society in general. And a lot of us now are encountering either the prospect of doing that or in the midst of it. Can you give us just a little bit of insight in what that was like for you and maybe any advice to anyone that's entering that stage?
I mean, I was really lucky, blessed, privileged that my father was still very capable of caring for my mother. But she was getting to the point where he wasn't living his life because he was her caregiver. So my brother and I insisted that we move my mom closer to me where I could take care. I did put her in a place where she had good care, but it was a few miles from my house where I could visit her every day. And my father would drive up from Atlanta, spend a week with us, hang out with my mom for a week, and then go back and live his life because he was still very active and involved in his community and stuff. So, I loved being able to visit her, spend time with her. It was a really sad, it was 7 years of her not knowing me, but showing up with her. I would take my young daughter with me to visit her. And, I will just say that the thing that I learned, I read books and talked to people. It's never easy. And especially with something like Alzheimer's or any kind of cognitive decline, I mean, for them to lose their identity and lose who they are is probably the saddest thing to see. But I think there's still moments of joy that you can find in there. Like every once in a while, she would say something and I would be like, oh my gosh, like that really made sense. So I kept a little notebook of things she said, even when she didn't have her wits about her, little word salad, and then something brilliant would come out of her mouth. One of the things she said to me was, what am I supposed to learn here? And I just remember thinking, wow, there's still something going on in her mind. And so I feel very blessed to have been able to spend that time with her, as hard as it was. I mean, that's probably the main thing I would share with people is that there are bright moments that you will always treasure.
I love the fact that you actually kept a journal of those things because, and you chose to write down the positive things, the things that would, bring you joy.
I still have them pinned on my wall.
Oh,
nice. That sounds like a book if you wanted to share with the world.
I could see that. Author of 5 books already.
So, Melisa, you lived in Greenville, you were in South Carolina, your dad was in Atlanta. So you are a Southerner. What does that mean to you and how does that shape you?
Yeah, I am a Southerner through and through. I was raised in Atlanta. I went to college in Georgia. I did my residency in Virginia, and then I spent 30 years in South Carolina, and now I've come back to Georgia. Being a Southerner, it's really, it's interesting because people obviously stereotype Southerners still. And I'm proud of being from the South because I think that, especially in the work I've done with Girlology, I mean, we talk about reproductive health. I'm a gynecologist. I talk about sex. I talk about violence against women. I talk about women's rights. And one of the things I've learned from the women that I've grown up around is how to communicate civilly and respectfully. And, as I just think I've learned how to say things in a way that is less polarizing and is less pointing fingers, but just trying to introduce some curiosity or trying to just say things in a way that, people can relate to. So I don't know if that makes sense, but I just think being raised Southern where we communicate a little bit differently, we may move a little slower, we may talk a little more slowly, but I don't know. I think there's a graciousness and a grace that we're brought up to live with or to try to extend to others that I'm proud of.
My favorite Southern expression is bless your heart.
And when I knew you were going to say that.
Yeah. When you first hear it, I'm from Los Angeles. You're like, okay, bless your heart. Okay. But now it is the tone. It is, sort of the feeling behind it. And I use that all the time and I just love it. So there is I've learned how to be a better communicator, I would say, during my stint here in Atlanta. And I agree with you wholeheartedly.
Yeah, absolutely.
On the lines of communication, and I can definitely vouch for you being an amazing communicator. I do want to talk a lot, if we can, about how Girlology came about with you and Dr. Hutchinson, and what that has meant to you. I know I can just, we've kind of talked about it in the introduction, but author of 5 books and for me, you've been such an amazing mentor. I always loved pediatrics and adolescents as a gynecologist. Never did it formally, but loved talking to young girls. And when I came across your program, I was introduced by one of our friends, MSMs. I just fell in love. And Sylvia can probably attest to the fact that when I came to my girls' trip and talked about Girlology, they were like, oh my gosh, that is amazing. You look so excited. So again, I tend to pack questions with a lot of questions and a lot of talk. But can you just tell us about how Girlology came about and what that has meant to you?
Yeah, I mean, Girlology, it truly has been my life's passion. And I have the same feelings towards adolescent girls that you do. I was a general OBGYN, but I loved my adolescent patients. And I did get extra training in pediatric and adolescent gyne I kind of grandmothered into the specialty because I didn't have a fellowship when I was there, but I did a lot of work to do it, to get there. But Girlology really started because I had so many women in my practice who, number one, didn't understand their body and how it worked as adults, but also mothers in my practice who would ask me to talk to their daughters about their periods, or will you tell my daughter not to have sex until she's married? I mean, I would get all kinds of crazy requests, right? And so one day, my chairman, who was, I've talked about before, his wife was one of my favorite people in the world. And she had a daughter, and she came up to me and said, Melissa, I need you to talk to Katie about her periods. And I was like, you're like the wife of an OBGYN. Don't you know how to do that? And she said, I don't want to say the wrong thing. I want to get it right. I'd rather you do it. And I said, great. So I will talk to Katie, but I need you there. And then I realized that Katie went to a school. We were in Charleston, South Carolina at the time. Katie went to an all-girls school, and a lot of those mothers were also my patients. And I thought, ooh, they're all going to ask me to do the same thing, and I don't have time for that. So I said, bring them all together. We're going to have one big Saturday, and we're going to teach them. So I called Trish Hutchison, my best friend and a pediatrician, and I said, hey, come do this with me. You talk about development. I'll talk about the periods, and we'll get this going. So that was our first Girlology session. We had about 20 girls in my waiting room with their mothers. We insisted that their mothers came with them because I knew if we talked to the girls and they went home and had questions, like I wasn't going to be there anymore. They needed somebody to answer their questions. And I knew the mothers would also want to know exactly what we said to them and who asked what and yada, yada. So it was selfish at first, but that struck a chord. And within a week, we had probably 4 phone calls asking us to do the same thing for a soccer team, for a Girl Scout troop, for other groups. So that was the start. It resonated. And that was in 2003. It was a long time ago. Right. So we kept doing this. It grew by word of mouth organically. Emma Sims was one of my former residents who was in the Woodlands with Angela. Angela came and did a training. We taught other physicians how to do what we were doing. We had the curriculum written up, and we had a speaker's kit and things like that. So that was our way to scale what we were doing, because Trish and I were being asked to travel all over the country to do this class for other people. And we didn't have the capacity. We had little kids and we didn't want to do all that traveling. So we taught other people how to do it. Angela did one of the most amazing first Girlology programs in Atlanta there were 100 plus people there. And it was the first time we even mentioned it. So it was amazing. And I think a lot of people had a lot of fun with it. But what really struck me is how you could watch a young girl, and these were 4th graders mostly, and her mother or grandmother or aunt or whoever brought her, or her dad. We had some dads show up. You could watch everything change in like 2 hours. They came in scared and awkward and not feeling good to like tossing tampons at each other and wanting to hold our uterus puppet at the end. So it was this experience that really changed, I think, the attitude of girls and their caregivers as they left and started a springboard for conversation. But it also was giving me tremendous joy. Fast forward to the digital age, we were getting asked, do we do webinars? Can we do this digitally? In 2017, we met a person who's still working with us, Jonathan, who was working in digital education, on-demand videos. And he's like, you guys have to go digital. So he helped us create a website and a digital product. And then in 2019, we released our app. And so we continued to build our content beyond puberty and periods to include every topic for girls' health, ranging from really pre-puberty to adolescence. So we have skincare, mental health, body image, all those things. And then finally, and it's a long story, it's 20 years of history, so I'm almost done.
Tell it all.
It's great.
But finally, we have kept up with, cultural changes in girls' health, research changes in girls' health, and the digital world. And so in 2004, we actually launched our AI chatbot. Her name is Dr. Momfidence. She
224.
accesses our entire library of content. We have over 600 on-demand videos in our library now, and downloadable resources and ebooks and things like that. So she accesses that and helps personalize the content for anyone who asks her a question. And she delivers this bullet-pointed answer that only comes from Girlology proprietary content. We do have a partnership with the Pediatric and Adolescent Society, that national organization called NASPAG. We use some of their content, so only trusted content is included in the answers. And then so we launched her in 2024, and then we also are using now AI agents that actually help us understand what the needs are out there. So now I get a report every Monday that tells me, what are moms asking? What are they worried about? What do they need? And we're able to continue to develop our content to address those needs. And the last thing I'll say about Girlology is, because it's been such a passion project, we do have to pay the bills. We did put it behind a paywall when we first made it. But in November of 2024, we ungated all of our content for parents. So it's over 300 videos just for parents. So they have full unrestricted access to content to help their daughters understand their reproductive health, their mental health, even skincare. And our AI chatbot is free for anyone to use. So we have doctors using it to write summaries of their visits and recommended resources. And we have a lot of parents using it to access trusted information. We just want to be a trusted resource on all things girls' health. And I think that's where we have finally landed.
So, obviously, this has just been a completely organic process for you, but it's been driven by what, if anyone is in your presence for a just small period of time, could tell you, is that you are passionate about empowering young girls to be their best selves, but to know their body, not be ashamed of it, to celebrate their body. But more than that, what I think was really important is you also incorporated the caregiver, the person that they trust the most, so that these kids or young women are not seeking their information from anyone other than a trusted source, like, mother, father, a trusted, person in their life, which I think really separated you from what we were doing before. And, I'd go and talk to, young girls at school and, that sort of thing. But without the trusted source with them, sometimes that gets lost in translation. So I have to commend
research
you
to confirm that. There's research that says that girls really want this information from their mom or their parents or their caregiver. But I think so many parents don't think that. They think they really want the information from TikTok, and that's where they're going, but they prefer to get it from a trusted adult.
Right. And you stayed up to date on everything along the way, which is also commendable and being relevant. In continuing to stay. Yeah. No. So kudos to you.
You mentioned body image, and social media is sort of a nightmare, I think, for women, because it tells us a lot of things about how we should, air quotes, appear. Can you talk about body image and how we can break the cycle of body hate?
Yeah, even on the Super Bowl, there's commercials about body image, everything. Everybody's raising awareness about it, but nobody's really moving the needle, unfortunately. And in the Girlology community, I'll tell you, it's the number one concern we get from moms. Anytime moms are sending in questions or we have a panel, there's always concern about, how can I help my daughter have a better relationship with her body than I had growing up? And, this has been generational. Our mothers dealt with it. It's just throughout time, there have been all these influences on how we are supposed to look. It's always unattainable. It always has to do with, it's really being driven by the male gaze. And I think we're finally getting to a point where people are tired of that and they're ready for something different. But here's the problem. You're not going to learn how to have a better body image through a TED Talk or reading an article or saying, I love my thighs in the mirror 3 times a day. It just doesn't work. And so 2 years ago, we decided to really take a deep dive on body image. And I've learned so much because I will tell you, I was a gymnast in high school. I grew up with, struggles with my own body image. Throughout my life, I made lots of mistakes with my own 3 daughters in the things I said or the things that I modeled in front of them. And since diving into learning more about how to really change this, I've become, it's even helped me. I mean, as a menopausal woman, I'm still learning, and obviously our bodies are continuing to change. So what we did was we brought in a psychologist who's like, this is her ball of wax. I mean, this is what she does. She works in body image with girls and their moms a lot. We went to health coaches. We talked to girls. We talked to college age women. We dove into the theory of embodiment, which, there's a historical thing about embodiment and all kinds of different cultural implications, whether it's, looking at embodiment through religion lens or looking at embodiment through an athletic lens. But when we look at it for body image, we learn that it's really a practice that we need. Instead of learning something to make us have better body image, we have to establish a practice. And that is how we change our mindset and change our behaviors. And so we have developed a practice for girls. We created an on-demand video class for girls that I think is world-class. It was led by 2 college students who've been through some body image training with Girlology. They did an amazing job. They're adorable, and any young teen would aspire to be like them. And when we started releasing that class, the feedback we got from the teen girls that were in it, preteen and teen, was that this is great, but can you talk to my mom? She still is saying things. She's still acting like this. So then we decided to release a body image coaching for moms. And again, we're making this free. We're launching it this month. So by the time this airs, maybe it will be out, but
Perfect.
We'll put it in the show notes.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we can put it in the show notes. It's a weekly tip, one simple thing to do or think about each week that will begin to change that mindset, help you establish a practice, because it requires practice. We have to remind ourselves daily of all these different things we can do to learn how to feel our body, how to experience our body, and not just be in our heads about what our body looks like when we're doing things or what people are thinking about us. So you guys are getting me on all these topics I'm so passionate about, and I keep going on and on. I'm so sorry, but I'm so passionate about it. And I think we can make such a difference.
Yeah, absolutely. And together. And you mentioned you went into a little bit of a menopause. So number one, I'm really excited to dive into the embodiment coaching and looking at all that. But you did mention menopause, and I know that you have joined us in that stage. Can you speak a little bit about what that change has been like for you? I know that you typically encounter things and conquer them. What has it been like for you?
I'm sure I preceded y'all pretty significantly in that. Menopause I find it liberating in many ways. I find that I've had to be very intentional, or probably more intentional than ever, about self-care, which for me involves weight training, watching my nutrition, watching my alcohol intake, practicing self-care. I started a meditation practice, which helped me.
Yeah.
And this whole embodiment journey has really helped me embrace my aging body. I see aging as a privilege. And I just want to do it as well as I can.
That was a
that one
perfect
down.
segue because you started talking about self-care, and we always ask all of our guests how they practice self-care. So you mentioned meditation and weight training, as well as certainly the body image and mindfulness is how I look at it.
Mhm.
Is there one additional practice that you anticipate doing in the future, you'd like to do? Or is there one pearl you'd like to leave our listeners with on self-care?
I think there's also a lot of science coming out that creativity should be a big part of our
I
self-care. And so for
love that.
me, I'm hoping to find more time for creative pursuits. Yeah.
Is that painting or
Yes.
drawing or photography? I'm just
Well, it's a little
want
bit
to
of
know.
everything. I mean, I might crochet something, I might paint something, I might refinish a piece of furniture. All of that is creative for me. So as long as I have an ongoing creative project, that allows me to get in there. It's a very mindful, mindless
Mm.
time that I think really feeds my soul.
So you definitely, I know you have good self-care practices, and this entire experience that you've had since, really a young one in the career of medicine and OBGYN, having 3 girls. I mean, I can't imagine having more information than from someone like you as a mother. But as a mother of girls, is there anything that you would like to share with our audience? Maybe some takeaway pearls that you'd like to impart in terms of what you've learned along the way? Maybe things that you would do different or things that you would actually do more of.
Yeah, number one, I would have learned embodiment way younger for sure, and been a better role model for my own kids. But raising 3 daughters who are all very, very different. I mean, I think that's the beauty of having this honor of raising children, if that's what you choose to do, obviously. But for me, discovering their unique interests and their unique paths, and just supporting them in that path has been my greatest joy. They didn't do what I thought they would necessarily do from the get-go. I was sure one of them would love gymnastics, and my husband was sure one of them would love soccer, but they did neither. Like, one went into horses and one went into theater. I knew nothing about any of that,
Mm.
and that is what was fun. So I just think the only pearl I have is just to allow your children to follow their passions, and they will turn it into, something pretty magical if they can pursue that in some way.
So can I ask an additional question? Because you did tell us that your dad was completely supportive of you and knew that you could do art and medicine. Did you have some of the same conversations with your girls? I know, particularly the artist, because some people would still say, you're not, you may need to do something else to support yourself if, this doesn't happen.
Yes, I will talk about my middle daughter because she was a theater kid. She wanted to be a famous stage performer. She was a singer and a songwriter. And when it was came time to take the SAT, she was like, "Oh, I don't even care because I'm going to college based on an audition. It's not going to be
Mhm.
about my SAT scores." I'm like, but you need to make sure you have options." So she did go to a college that was only based on audition. She got in there. She was a singer-songwriter major at Berklee College of Music.
Oh, that's
Um,
Yeah.
huge.
it
She's really
was
good, actually.
huge.
She's very good.
And I was nervous. I was like, "Oh my gosh, she's gonna be waiting tables in Nashville or somewhere horrible." And she was following that path, but she discovered for herself that when she did go to Nashville and did an internship, and she came home and she said, "I hate the way they treat women and minorities, and I want to do something about it." And so she decided to go to law school. And
Oh,
so she
nice. I
is
didn't.
yeah, so she's an attorney now, and, she is a passionate advocate in the music industry, and a
Wow.
very good attorney for I mean, she's doing intellectual property, which extends beyond the music industry, but that's
Mhm.
what really got her to where she is, and she's thriving. She's living in New York City, living her best life, and I would have never thought it when all she wanted to do was, be on Broadway or,
Yeah.
be on the radio,
Yes.
but she
Wow.
found her way.
Mhm.
That
With
is
your support.
fantastic.
Mhm.
So, Melissa, we are going to just thank you. Thank you for sharing all these wonderful pearls with our audience. Thank you for sharing your journey with us here on Boss Sleep. Can you please let us know how we can reach you on social media?
I'm not good on social media, so if you want to learn more about Girlology, just follow Girlology. I am there, but don't expect much from me. But also the Girlology website and app are both the Girlology app you can download for free and access a lot of content for free. So it's in the Apple Store and on Google Play. And the Girlology website is just girlology.com.
Forgive me because I'm doing something that we don't normally do, is we're kind of ending the segment. But I did want to briefly hear, because it was in my notes to ask you about the period project. And I think
Yeah.
I'm not saying the whole thing,
Yeah.
but it's actually a very important project. Can you just give us a brief,
Yeah.
little bit of
So
information
it's
about
the Period Education Project.
education?
And
Mhm.
Girlology, when we had all of our content behind a paywall, we still wanted to make it accessible to communities that could never afford our content.
Mhm.
And so I also had some medical students working with me that wanted to teach Girlology in the community. And the Girlology content was a little too broad for them to master to do that quickly. So they decided to create a curriculum just on menstrual health. And so we created the Period Education Project. And it's now a national nonprofit. We're in 25 medical schools, but we train medical students to go into their communities and lead educational workshops on menstrual health, mostly for adolescents and young adults.
Love it.
That is
Okay, great. And we're gonna
fantastic.
yes,
We
yeah, I did.
needed that. Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
Because what's
So
really interesting is everybody thinks doctors know everything about periods, but they don't get this education in med school. And a lot of these med students are not necessarily going into OBGYN. So it's lovely to have them going into pediatrics and internal medicine and family medicine with this expanded knowledge of menstrual health.
so important. And I know those doctors that aren't comfortable with it appreciate the
Yeah.
extra. So yeah, exactly like Sylvia. Okay, so now I think I'd love to talk to you about so many other things, but as I said, I cannot thank you enough for being here. I can't thank you enough for being the person that you are, just completely authentic and passionate about what you're doing. And I see Girlology continuing to grow, and can't wait to see what the future holds. And am proud to call myself a girlologist for the rest of my life.
Yes, you are.
So until we meet again, Melisa, and to our listeners, may you be well.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really honored to be on your podcast. And I think you guys are doing just amazing work, putting this out there, helping the next generation figure things out and how to really succeed in their careers. It's really important.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Sylvia, that was so amazing. I think we both anticipated this interview to be kind of rock star performance from Melisa, and she did not disappoint.
Did
And
not.
definitely can't wait to have her back again. In terms of what we learned, I think so much. And in terms of what we're going to take away, I'll let you go first and tell us what your thoughts are in terms of your pearls or words of wisdom.
So first off, she was an art major, ART major, graduated with a bachelor's in fine arts, and then went to medical school. I think we just dropped the mic right there. So often we are told that you have to be a science major in order to go to medical school. It prepares you, blah, blah, blah. And she is proof that that is not the case. So I think that was my biggest take home. And then she also talked about not being afraid to pivot. And that is one of our golden rules that we have here at Boss Sleep, leaping to that next lily pad, leaping to that next opportunity and not being afraid or really doing it in spite of the fear. I think those are my two biggest take homes. What about you?
Yeah. Oh, again, so many. I think number one, the value of creativity. And I think she alluded to that even being something that is valuable as we get older. That this really is kind of off subject, but I took it to heart. Aging is a privilege. So let's do it well, be our best and healthiest selves as we do this. And then I think part of the whole Girlology premise is the importance of trusted resources. And that's what Girlology has provided in terms of educating not only the adolescent women and girls that are obtaining this education, but educating the mothers, the aunts, the fathers, whomever the caregivers are, so that they are also trusted resources and feel comfortable talking about the conversation of puberty, which for so long has been some kind of like a taboo
It's
subject,
taboo.
which it shouldn't, it really shouldn't be. And then I'm really interested, honestly, to hear about this embodiment program that she's talking about. And it's important, to talk about body image and the mantra that we say in the mirror, like, you are beautiful, our bodies are strong. But we have to embody that. And particularly, what are we showing others if we're, constantly talking about the way this looks or that looks and trying to change things. So yeah, just so much to think about and ponder on. And I can't wait until our next episode. And anyway, until we meet again, Sylvia, may you and our listeners be well.
May you be well.
That's a wrap on another episode of Boss Leap. May this conversation enlighten your path toward personal growth and professional empowerment. For more thought-provoking and eye-opening discussions like this one, head to our website at bossleappodcast.com. Always remember to celebrate your wins and trust yourself. A positive mindset can push you out of your comfort zone and into far greater heights. Until next time, may you be well.
Before we go, there's one more thing the lawyers have asked us to include. It's the legal language. And you know how doctors love lawyers. This podcast is presented only for educational and entertainment purposes. Although we are doctors, on this show, we are just your friends. This podcast is not intended as a substitute for the advice of your physician, professional coach, psychotherapist, or other qualified professionals. Understood? Awesome. We'll see you in the next episode.